I was pronounced dead at 4:47 in the afternoon. My wife tells me the monitor flatlined and the room went the kind of quiet that has a sound to it. Not silence, but a hum, like the air itself was holding its breath. 15 minutes passed. 15 minutes with no heartbeat, no breath, nothing. And in those 15 minutes, I lived something I still don't have the right words for, even though I've been trying to find them for the last 3 years. I want to tell you what happened. Not because I need you to believe me, I know how this sounds, but because I promised somebody I would. I promised him. Let me back up. I was 52 years old, a contractor by trade, the kind of man who fixed things with his hands and didn't put much stock in things he couldn't touch. I went to church on Christmas and Easter because my mother would have haunted me if I didn't. I believed in God the way you believe the ocean exists, even though you've never seen it. As a fact, somewhere out there, not something that had anything to do with my Tuesday afternoons. I had a heart attack on a Tuesday afternoon. I was on a ladder, of all things, cleaning gutters at a job site, and I remember the pain hit like somebody had reached into my chest and closed a fist around something vital. I remember falling. I remember hitting the ground and thinking, absurdly, I just bought this ladder. And then I remember nothing. Nothing at all, for what felt like no time whatsoever, and also felt like it lasted longer than my entire life put together. I still don't know how both of those things can be true. They just are. The first thing I want to tell you, and this is the part that changed me more than anything else that happened over there, is what I saw the moment I left my body. Because I want you to understand, it wasn't a tunnel. Not at first. It wasn't light at the end of some corridor. The first thing I saw was myself. I was standing, though standing isn't quite right because I didn't have legs the way you'd think of legs. I was present, aware, hovering near the ceiling of that job site, looking down at a man on the ground surrounded by 2 coworkers doing chest compressions on a body that used to be mine. And I felt no fear. That's the part people never believe. I felt no fear at all. I felt something closer to curiosity, the way you'd watch a stranger struggle to parallel park, a kind of detached, gentle interest. And then a thought came to me, not in words exactly, but in something clearer than words. That's not the important part. That's when everything changed. I want to describe what happened next as carefully as I can, because I think it matters. I think it's the whole reason I'm standing up here talking to you tonight. The instant that thought passed through me, the scene below me didn't fade so much as it simply stopped mattering. The way a television left on in another room stops mattering when someone you love walks into yours. And I was somewhere else. Not a tunnel. Not yet. I was in a field. I know how strange that sounds for a near-death experience. A field of all things. But I need you to understand, this wasn't grass and dirt like you and I know it. Every blade of it seemed to carry its own quiet light, as if the color green had been invented specifically for that place, and everywhere else was just a rumor of it. And the light wasn't coming from a sun. There was no sun. The light came from everywhere and nowhere, and it wasn't harsh. It was more like being held than being lit. I stood in that field, and for the first time since I'd left my body, I felt something I can only describe as being fully known. Every mistake I'd ever made, every lie I'd ever told my wife about where I'd been, every time I'd walked past someone who needed help because I was in a hurry, every kindness too, the times I'd stayed late to help a young guy on my crew learn a trade, the nights I'd sat with my dying father even when I was exhausted. All of it was just there, laid out, known, not judged, not yet, just known, the way you know your own name. And that's when I saw him. I want to be careful here, because I know the word Jesus carries so much weight, so much baggage, so many different pictures for different people. I didn't see a man in white robes with a golden halo like a painting in Sunday school. What I saw first was light that had shape, light that somehow had a face, had eyes, had presence, the way you can recognize someone you love by their silhouette in a doorway before you ever see their features. I knew, before I understood how I knew, exactly who was standing in front of me. He didn't speak first. That's something I've thought about 1,000 times since. He didn't scold me, didn't ask me to recite anything, didn't quiz me on doctrine. He just looked at me. And I want you to understand, When I say he looked at me, I don't mean it the way somebody looks at you in a hallway. I mean his attention felt like it had never once, in 52 years, been anywhere else. Like I was the only thing that had ever existed. And in that look, I felt the strangest combination of things. I felt completely exposed, every failure visible, and at the exact same time, I felt more loved than I had ever felt in my entire life. More loved than my wedding day, more loved than the day my son was born. Those two things, being fully seen and being fully loved, I always thought they were opposites. They're not. That was the first thing he taught me, before he ever said a word. Then he spoke, and I need to tell you, his voice didn't move through the air the way sound does here. It moved through me. It was in my chest before it was in my ears. And what he said to me was so simple I almost missed the weight of it. He said, "Michael, do you know why you're here?" And I said, "Well, I didn't say it with my mouth. I don't think I had a mouth in the way you'd understand it, but I communicated it, the way you communicate now without needing to translate your thoughts into words first." I said, "Because I died." And he smiled, not a mocking smile. A patient one, the kind a father gives a child who's given the honest but incomplete answer. And he said, "No, you're here because I wanted to show you something, and you needed to be still enough to see it." That's when he took me to the place I've spent 3 years trying to describe and failing every time. But I'll try again for you tonight. He didn't walk me through a tunnel of light showing me heaven's gates or choirs of angels, though I want to be honest, I did hear something like music, distant, layered, the kind of sound that made every song I'd ever loved on earth feel like a child banging on pots and pans by comparison. But that wasn't what he wanted me to see. What he showed me was a room. I don't know how else to describe it. It wasn't a physical room with walls. It was more like a space carved out of that light, where I could see, where I could watch, moments of my own life, but not the way you'd watch a home movie. I was inside them again, fully, every sense engaged, but I was also somehow outside them at the same time, seeing them from other people's eyes. He showed me the day I yelled at my son Danny when he was 11, because he'd scratched the paint on my truck backing his bike out of the garage. I remembered that day as a minor blip, a dad losing his temper for 30 seconds over nothing. But Jesus showed it to me from Danny's side. I felt what my son felt standing there, the way his stomach dropped, the way he believed, for just a moment, that my love for him had a price, and he'd just failed to pay it. I felt that fear ripple through him and settle somewhere it didn't belong. Somewhere it's probably still sitting today at 30 years old. I wept. If you can weep without a body, and I promise you, you can. I wept harder in that room than I had at either of my parents' funerals. But here's what I need you to understand, because this is the part people get wrong when they hear stories like mine. He didn't show me that moment to condemn me. He showed it to me the way a doctor shows you an X-ray, not to shame you for the break, but so you understand what needs to heal. Because right after that memory, he showed me another one. He showed me the morning after, when I'd sat Danny down, unprompted, and apologized, and told him I loved him more than any truck that ever rolled off any lot. I'd forgotten that moment completely. It had been buried under 30 years of ordinary days. But Jesus hadn't forgotten it. He remembered it like it happened an hour ago. And he told me, and this is close to word for word, because I've turned it over in my mind every single night since. He said, "I don't measure you by your worst moment, Michael. I measure you by whether you turned back toward love. Every time you turned back, I was already there waiting, and I was proud of you before you even took the step." I think that's the first thing every soul sees, if I'm honest with you. Not the tunnel, not the light. The first thing you see is yourself, finally without the excuses, and the first thing you feel is that you are loved anyway. Loved in a way that was never actually dependent on you deserving it in the first place. That undid me more than anything else that happened over there. He showed me more rooms after that. He showed me a stranger, a woman I'd helped once, years ago, when her car broke down on the side of the highway in the rain, and I stopped to help even though I was late to pick up my daughter from school. I remembered it as a 10-minute inconvenience. Jesus showed me what happened to her after. That single act of kindness, me standing in the rain with a flashlight, showing her how to jump her battery, had convinced her, on a night she later told no one about, not to end her own life, because it had reminded her that strangers could still be kind, that the world wasn't as cold as she'd decided it was that week. I never knew that. I never will know it. Not fully. Not until I get there again for good. But he showed it to me, and he said, "You see, Michael, you don't get to know most of what your love does once you release it. That's not your job. Your job was only to give it. I take care of the rest." I asked him, and I don't know if I asked with words or just with the ache and whatever passed for my soul in that place. I asked him why. Why show me this? Why now? Why me? A man who barely prayed, who cursed more than he should have, who cheated on his taxes twice and never told a soul. And he said something I will spend the rest of my life trying to live up to. He said, because you're going back. And when you go back, you're going to forget most of what I showed you tonight. That's how it works. That's how it has to work. Or you couldn't function in that world anymore. But I need you to remember this one thing. Just this one thing, Michael. Every person you pass for the rest of your life is standing in a room like the one I just showed you. Every single one. You don't get to see their rooms, but I do. And I love them exactly the way I love you. Completely. And not because they've earned it. If you remember nothing else, remember that the way you treat people is the only thing you're actually building while you're down there. Everything else turns to dust. That doesn't. I felt something shift in me after he said that. Not fear, not even sadness, though I knew what was coming. I felt something like readiness, and he told me it was time. Not with any drama, no trumpets, no dramatic goodbye. He simply said, "Go back and turn toward love, every single time you can. I'll be right here when you're finished." And then, and I want to be honest with you, because this is the part I can never quite explain, there wasn't a falling sensation, there wasn't a slam back into my body like you see in the movies. There was simply a shift, like waking from the deepest sleep of your life. And the first thing I heard wasn't the field, wasn't the music, wasn't his voice. It was my wife, screaming my name, and a paramedic yelling, "We've got a pulse." Like it was the best news anyone had ever delivered in the history of the world. 15 minutes. That's what the hospital chart says. 15 minutes with no heartbeat. And in that 15 minutes I lived, or died into, something that has restructured every single day I've had since. People ask me what changed. It's a fair question, and I don't have some tidy church bulletin answer for you. I didn't become a monk. I didn't sell my business and move to a monastery. I still lose my temper sometimes in traffic, God help me. But I notice things now. I notice the cashier who looks like she's had a long day, and I take the extra 10 seconds to actually look at her and ask if she's doing okay, and mean it. I notice my son, he's 30 now, married, a father himself, and I tell him I love him every single time I see him, out loud, because I know now that love said out loud lands somewhere permanent, even if I never see where it lands. I stopped believing that kindness is a small thing. I used to think the big moments were the ones that mattered, the promotions, the milestones, the achievements. I know now that it's the small ones. It was always the small ones. A flashlight in the rain, an apology to an 11-year-old. Those are the rooms that get remembered. I think about that field more than I think about almost anything else in my life. I think about the fact that I was fully known and fully loved in the same instant, and how I spent 52 years on earth believing those two things couldn't coexist. Believing that if people really knew me, really saw the whole of me, they couldn't possibly love what they found. I know now that's a lie. It might be the first lie, the original one, the one underneath so many others, because I was known completely over there. Every shortcut, every lie, every small cruelty, and I was loved without one single condition attached to it. If that's true for me, I have come to believe with everything I have left in me that it's true for you too. Whoever you are, sitting here tonight, whatever room you're carrying around inside yourself that you think disqualifies you from being loved, I promise you with the 15 minutes I was given to see it, you are already known, completely, and you are already loved, completely. That was never something you had to earn. It was only ever something you had to accept. I don't know how much time any of us have left. I didn't either, on that Tuesday afternoon on a ladder I just bought. But I know this, every person you'll pass tomorrow is standing in a room he can see, and you can't. You don't need to know what's in it. You just need to turn toward love every single time you're given the chance to. That's the whole assignment. That's all he asked of me. And it's the only thing I've got left to ask of you. Thank you for letting me tell you about my 15 minutes.